Thanks for staying with Facing the Nation. Certainly a very informative conversation with the advisor, presidential advisor on the environment. And the conversation came really at an opportune time because it can be linked to the next conversation that I'm going to be having, which is with the Minister of Communities, the Honorable Ronald Bulkan. Of course, he's no stranger to Facing the Nation. He's always here and always ready and prompt whenever I call. He also comes on this program at not a very opportune time because, as you know, the government of Guyana, the APNU-AFC government, is currently in observation mode. I wouldn't say full celebration mode because even though we've achieved a lot in 1 year, there's much more to be done. So we're in observation mode where we're observing 1 year in office. So it is my pleasure at this time to be speaking with the Minister of Communities, the Honorable Ronald Bulkan. Welcome back to Facing the Nation.
Thank you very much, Malika.
Right,
thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be here.
And I should say happy anniversary.
Thank you very much.
To you.
And a pleasant good day to all of our viewers.
Great. Before we even talk about some of the achievements of your ministry in the past year, maybe just under a year, let's talk about what's been happening with the vendors, because I know the Mayor and City Council to some extent falls under your ministry. We've had, I know there's a solution right now, but we have seen issues where we had the vendors more or less getting nasty with government and to some extent your ministry. And some people may say rightfully so because they feel as though it's a bread and butter issue and you know, their livelihoods were taken away. I know there's a solution right now, but let's talk about in the future. Is there anything that can be done, for want of a better word, in a better manner in terms of removing persons? Because we've also heard that what they've been doing is actually vending illegally. Are there measures that will be put in place to ensure that the procedure of removal in the future is a easier one, a better system?
Malika, to answer your question, the first thing I'd like to make clear is that the responsibility for organizing public vending, it's not a responsibility of the central government or of the ministry, but rather it's one of our respective local government organs. I guess that I would say that perhaps your question, in a sense, betrays what used to be the prevailing, or rather the conventional philosophy that was engendered over an extended period of time, where it was seen as a responsibility of central government for the management of our communities and our areas countrywide. But in actual fact, we are now in a new construct, a new dispensation, if you will, one that sees the central government recognizing the authority and the responsibility for the management of our communities and public places and spaces to be that of our respective local government organs. So I'm not suggesting that the central government or the ministry will be entirely divorced from the question of how vending is organized, but the point should be established that it is a responsibility of our local councils. Those councils having recently having had their democratic credentials returned via a democratic process, local government elections. So our new councillors in areas all across our country, they have a mandate from the residents of their respective communities in keeping with constitutional provisions to manage and develop their respective areas. However, to further elaborate on this question of vending, it is not a simple issue, Malika. It might not be entirely complex, but where the issue loses its simplicity, if you will, is the fact that unregulated vending was allowed to take place over an extended period of time. And it is no fault of the vendors. It was the fault of the authorities who had, if you will, they were delinquent in their responsibility to organize and manage public places for the benefit of the public, as we heard from your previous guest, Rear Admiral Gary Best. So now we have a central government that is prepared to allow our respective councils to enjoy that independence that is guaranteed to those councils under the Constitution, to be able to bring back order, if you will, to the management of public places. And in this regard, the issue of vending is quite important. But because, as I have said, unregulated vending was allowed to take place over an extended period of time, it makes the issue not that simple, because we have a situation where a great number of persons depend on this activity for their livelihood, to provide for themselves and their families, and the fact that they were allowed to operate and to carry on their trade in the manner that obtained, and without due regard for the sanctity and the integrity and the environmental factors relating to public places. Bringing back that order requires some degree of sensitivity, and this is where I believe the involvement from the central government is necessary, where it can't be left only to our respective councils to ensure that the persons who are displaced and who will have to be relocated as part of this process, that due consideration is exercised, sufficient sensitivity and respect for the livelihoods, and even though their activities were in many cases in contravention to the bylaws of the councils. So it will require a partnership between the central government and our respective local government organs to look into the concerns.
I'm happy that you use the word partnership indeed, because this is one of the things that the current government, continues to use as a platform to better the lives of our citizens and so on. Before we come off of this issue, was your ministry eventually asked or sought out to have an input or for help in terms of sorting this matter out with the vendors?
There were some initial discussions at the level of the ministry in terms of the broad policy, where it was recognized that the activities that obtained, let's say, for example, at Stabroek Square, that it could not be, condoned or encouraged going forward, and that what was needed was, a return to order and regularity. Because, Malika, it is unfortunate, but let us not deny that a lot of the activities, they were conducted in an insanitary, unwholesome, manner, in contravention to public health, and it actually posed a serious danger to public health. And there was no regulation to what was taking place. The council has made it clear in discussions with the ministry as well as with the vendors that they are not against vending. What they are against is obstruction of public places, and that any vending that will take place will have to take place within a framework of order and respect for proper sanitation and environmental practices. So, for example, many persons were actually living in Stabroek Square in the absence of any proper sanitary facilities or things of that nature. And it led to a very undesirable situation. It meant that the public was being denied use to public places. And in the case of the Stabroek Square, that is, it's actually an iconic square.
Yes.
And it used to be at one time a place where, it was available for public enjoyment, but because of, neglect on the part of, successive authorities and councils over an extended period of time, what eventually had obtained there in Jurassic Park and other parts of Stabroek Square, requires attention, and this new council decided in their best judgment as part of their municipal plans going forward that order and regularity needed to be restored to Stabroek Square as part of a process of bringing back order and regulation across the city.
Order and regulation, indeed. And it's human nature. Anything new that's seemingly new, you will get some people grumbling about it. I guess it just takes getting used to. And the fact is, there are measures in place to ensure that better arrangements are made. All right, Minister, let's now talk about your almost 1 year in office and some of the achievements of the Ministry of Communities. I know the biggest one is the fact that we've had local government elections. Again, I know there were some teething problems, but after not having it for so many years and then having it, those problems were bound to happen. But I guess persons are looking forward to the next set of local government elections. But those elections aside, let's talk about the general achievements of the Ministry of Communities in almost a year.
Yes, Malika, it surprises us to see how quickly 1 year can pass.
Yes, it does.
We are constantly reminded that almost 20% of the life of this administration is over. We have a mere 4 years remaining before we return to the polls to face the electorate.
And when you say it like that.
To come for stewardship and hopefully to convince the majority of the population that we deserve a second chance. Malika, as you've alluded, we have a new ministry, the Ministry of Communities, and it encompasses what was formerly two ministries, namely the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development, as well as the Ministry of Housing and Water. The question, I believe, was asked at the outset, why a Ministry of Communities? But I think if we focus on those four areas, and incidentally, the ministry has four departments, namely the Department of, for Housing, for Water, for Local Government, and Regional Development. And when one looks at these areas, we can clearly see that the focus is on the human condition, because those areas are where people reside in communities, and the question of housing and water and local administration is in large measure determines what obtains in our communities, and therefore the naming of the ministry and the creation of the ministry betrays at a very strategic and fundamental level that the focus is clearly on the human condition or the conditions under which humans live. I believe our greatest challenge, Malika, was in the area of local administration or local government, which is encompassed in by referring to local democracy. What this administration inherited in relation to local democracy and local administration was sorry, I have to say, was a dysfunctional system. What obtained for the greater part of an extended period was a philosophy on the part of the central government that attempted to manage our country from the center. So there was no respect for the authority of our local councils. And again, the fact that local government elections were not held for more than 2 decades in itself betrays that philosophy of the central government, which is that they did not believe in a meaningful role for local government organs or to have meaningful local democracy. However, the APNU as well as the AFC in the 10th Parliament, we had prosecuted a policy position that if elected into office, we would place local government and local democracy on the front burner. And we were committed to repairing and rehabilitating that broken or collapsed system. And I believe that by any objective analysis, if there's an examination of the activities of the administration as well as the ministry, we can see that considerable strides have been made. So first of all, there is a fundamental recognition that the strategic philosophy, if you will, of this administration is one that speaks to decentralization of authority and devolution of power, and to respect the role of local government organs in keeping with our constitutional provisions. Malika and viewers, Article 12 of our Constitution sets the framework quite clearly. and it says that local government by freely elected representatives of the people is an integral part of the democratic organization of the state. There's an entire chapter that is titled Local Democracy and Local Government Organs, Chapter 7. In Article 74, it specifies what are the duties of local government organs. And it actually covers and encompasses all areas that relating to daily life, possibly with the sole exception of education, the conduct of foreign policy, as well as defense. So it includes not only the management and development of communities and our villages and townships, but it covers areas such as public safety and security, policing, and even employment, economic activities. So the role for local government organs is not optional, but it is prescribed in our supreme law. Article 75 guarantees autonomy to our local government organs. And other articles in chapter 7 establishes clearly that the responsibility for managing and developing our communities is mainly that of our local government organ. So this administration is committed to respecting that authority and autonomy of our local government councils. And even though many persons felt that it was not possible to have local government elections within the first year, I guess that's the proof of the pudding that we have shown that our actions matches our words.
Without necessarily being specific, have you been able to, after the 2016 local government elections, have you been able to pinpoint specifically what are some of the areas your ministry may need to tighten up on or change or add things to have a smoother flow or better holding of the next local government elections?
Malika, before we get to, before we get to the next local government elections, and to answer that question, let me say that the recently conducted local government elections are actually only possibly the first step in this repair process of this dysfunctional system that we inherited, which was the democratic renewal. What obtains now is that the new councils that have come into being is largely comprised of committed individuals, persons who have a great degree of enthusiasm and desire to improve these broken conditions that obtains in their communities. But what may be lacking in many instances is the requisite skill and the experience and the expertise for this task, for the management and development of their respective areas. And this is where the work of the ministry comes in, to be able to provide support. So in addition to the empowerment, the political empowerment that has come into being, is to now equip our councils to be able to assist them to have that capacity to be able to effectively discharge their responsibility. And this is actually a huge undertaking. Considerable training has to be provided. And this is where responsibility for the holding of the elections was more that of GCOM, not of the ministry. Our task begins with the new councils coming to being, and there's quite an active program to provide specific training to all of our local councils. It has begun with support provided to our RDCs, which are also under our constitution. These are the regional democratic councils, which are defined as local government organs in our constitution. Of course, those RDCs came into being 1 year ago, along with the general, because it's general and regional elections, where our councils were provided meaningful support to create development plans for their respective regions. Region 10 took the lead. Their development plan, which is called the Plan of Action for Regional Development, or a PARD, which is actually provided for in the Constitution. Article 77 provides for each region to have their own development plan. That those activities started since last year. At the beginning of this year, municipal plans or municipal development plans were created for 5 of our municipalities. Those were 5 of the what were formerly 6 municipalities, namely Corriverton, Rose Hall, New Amsterdam, Georgetown, and Linden. Unfortunately, Anna Regina, that council was so, their capacity was so degraded and dysfunctional that their municipal plan was not created. But going back as long ago as 2000, under the Urban Rehabilitation Program, these municipal development plans were actually prepared and created. But because of an absence of political will that I alluded to earlier, these councils were not allowed to move in that direction. So the ministry, in conjunction with support under a program known as CARELED, which is a Canadian-funded program that is funded by the Canadian government and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, those plans were, if you will, retrieved, taken off the shelf, dusted off, refined, and brought up to date in conjunction with the councils. But those would have been the previous councils. Now that the new councils have come into being, they're in the process of examining those plans to determine what components and aspects they will retain, which parts will be refined, which parts are probably not appropriate for immediate execution. So in that process of adopting ownership of these development plans, those 5 councils have started that process. The creation of a plan for Anna Regina has now begun. And then our 3 new townships, namely Mabaruma, Bartica, and Letem, that will be the second phase for their municipal development plans. And then equally, that activity will be taken to our 62 NDCs, or Neighborhood Democratic Councils. So our work is to be able to provide capacity and support to our councils. It's not to dictate, it is not to dominate. It's to remove that hand of control that existed in the past and to replace it with a hand of support.
I'm happy that you said that, because you preempted my next question, which is good, because we're coming down to program time. You basically gave a plan of what we can expect, because we're going to be, as we go ahead each year, we're going to be observing each year. And I think it's really good for us to do a report card of ourselves, knowing that this is a new government, and it will be a new government until the next 4 or 5 years, because the fact is we've had change after more than a decade, after 2 decades. So it is good to do that report card. I mean, we just have about 2 or 3 minutes before I have to wrap up with you, Minister. But let's talk about some of those things, the other things that you may want to fix, or that you see need, or you see it fit to have these things fixed.
The responsibility for the ministry, Malika, it covers and encompasses delivery of housing solutions to persons across our country. And I think our success rate with regards to delivery of housing solutions has not kept pace, has not matched the public expectations.
Okay.
And that this is one area that where we have to accelerate our efforts and improve the efficiency. I am, however, happy to say to you and to our viewers that the study, the housing profile study, a comprehensive study, is about to be completed with significant support from the UNDP, which will provide all of the baseline data in relation to exactly how many, whether it's service lots or housing units, are available for distribution in our respective areas, and where are the deficiencies, and where to identify the areas for new infrastructural development. So I think our efforts have to be accelerated in relation to housing needs for critical sections of our population, in particular those at the low-income level. With regards to the responsibility for water supply and GWI, in strategic terms, the 3 key activities are to increase the coverage, delivery of pure water supply, treated water to a greater number of communities, households, and individuals across our country, to reduce the level of what is referred to as non-revenue water, whether it's as a result of leakages in the distribution infrastructure or persons not paying for water that they're receiving. That the GWI is now in the process of preparing a new strategic plan for the period 2017 for the next 5 years, and that new strategic plan will be completed before the end of this year. And those are some of the key areas that will be focused on. The ministry also has responsibility for solid waste management. I am pleased to say that a lot of the, again, unwholesome aspects in relation to, let's say, the city of Georgetown and the management and operation of the Higgs-Bosch dump site will soon be a thing of the past, that the ministry very shortly will enter into a contract with a promoter to provide for a waste-to-energy plant that will incinerate all of the municipal waste that is being generated in the city of Georgetown and its environs to provide electricity. Once that happens, that will be a key area that I think the ministry can take great pride in. As regards, insofar as disappointments are concerned, there's one area that probably time does not permit for me to elaborate on, is the fact that the Local Government Commission has not come into being.
Okay.
But I can say to viewers that it's very imminent. We expect that by the early June, that commission will be operationalized. And, but in closing, I would like to think, Malika, that an objective analysis of the work of the ministry will find that whilst we are wanted in some areas, that some progress has been made. And I remind myself every day that we go to work that we have created huge expectations out there.
Yes.
But I am pleased and satisfied with the work of the two other ministers in the ministry, namely Minister Dawn Hastings-Williams and now Minister Valerie Patterson, as well as all of the management and officers within the ministry. And we look forward to the challenge for the remainder of this year and the remainder of our term.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, sir. It really has been a pleasure chatting with you. Viewers, of course, you've missed a big discussion if you're now tuning in. Minister Bulkan was talking about some of the achievements, disappointments, and ways in which the Ministry of Communities will improve as we go along. It is really good to continue to do these sort of, if you want to call it, self-report cards to see where you're at and where you need to be, because at the end of the day, it is for the benefit of the entire population. Minister of Communities, the Honorable Ronald Bulkan, thank you very much for being on Facing the Nation today, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Malika.
All right. I also take this opportunity to say thank you very much to the environmental advisor to the President, Rear Admiral Gary Best, for being here. Of course, you also missed a great discussion there. But for those of you who follow me on the social media, you can, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll see the discussion there, and it will also be posted to Facebook. I am Malika Ramsey. I know you missed the Jubilee update this week, but I promise to have a Jubilee update back tomorrow. We are still in preparation mode. Once again, congratulations to all those agencies, organizations, establishments that are already in 50th anniversary celebration mode. Of course, it's going to be on the 26th of May. Guyana celebrates 50 years as an independent nation. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for tuning in. Be good Guyanese citizens. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And of course, join me again next time. Goodbye.